Setting up your fonts inside of Elementor can be quite confusing. Because first of all, you have the H1 to H6, you can manipulate the size over here, you have all these values over here, pixels, EM, REM, you can connect it to your global fonts, but you also have typography settings over here, where you can set up sizes for your H1 to H6. And then lastly, you also have your custom fonts over here inside of Elementor. I've been doing this wrong for 3 years, but now I finally know how to properly set it up. So let me show you how this works. What I see most people do is they drag in a heading like this, and then they change the size with the H1 to H6 like this. And this means that you have 6 options for your headings. And then what they do is they set up the font over here. So let's say you want another font like that. Or they set up the fonts inside of the global fonts. And they set up the different fonts that they use over here. But nothing in terms of sizing, because that is handled by the H1 to H6. So then inside of the editor, they link the font to the global fonts, which is better to do than just to use this option. Because with global fonts, you can change everything from one place. But using the H1 to H6 for sizing is actually not that good for Google SEO. Because Google actually reads your website according to these titles. So the H1 is the most important one and the H6 is the least important one. And the normal text layers like this one are called the body text. So in a blog post, it's almost always the case that the H1 is the biggest one and is also the title which you want Google to read. Most websites are not blog posts, so let's take a look at a more realistic example. So here I have a client website and this is the main heading of this page. You could use the H1 here because it's the biggest one and this is also something that you want to be indexed on Google because people can type this into Google. But if you go, for example, to the How It Works page, now we have a different situation. Because first of all, this title is not as big in terms of size as this one, because this one is 48 and this one is 40. So if you would use the H1 to H6, this then would be the H2. And you could do that, but this is the text that you want Google to read, because this is something that people can type into Google and then you want Google to know, like, hey, send them to this page. But here you can see the issue, this one is a lot smaller. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that we need to separate how Google reads our website compared to how the users read the website. So therefore it's impossible to use this for sizes. Another argument is the limitation to only 6 headings, because we cannot add another heading over here. And of course, in your design, you could try to just work with 6 kind of titles, but sometimes you have a smaller one that is just a little bit bigger than the body font. And maybe you have another kind of subtitle like this. You see that on a lot of websites as well. And also on your body fonts. 16 is kind of like the default for most websites, but sometimes in your heading, you want a bigger body fonts. So let's take a look at this website again. Here, this body text is 18, but if you go to many other sections, you can see that the default is just 16. So you also want to be able to set that up. And luckily there is a workaround. But okay, let's say that we're gonna use the custom fonts in order to set up our sizes. Then what does the custom fonts over here mean? Well, this is actually the place where you upload the fonts that you want. Originally, inside of Elementor, this feature has been here to allow you to upload fonts that are not part of the Google fonts. Because by default, the fonts that you can select are your system fonts, so the basic fonts on your computer, but also all of the Google fonts, as you can see right here. These are loaded from the Google server, and you can pick them if you want something else. But Google Fonts, of course, doesn't have all the fonts, so that's why this option was here. You could just enter a name and then upload the actual font files that you download from a website. Maybe you paid for a font somewhere. You can upload them over here, and then they would appear over here inside of this menu. And most of the time, I just work with Google Fonts. So then there's no need to use this feature, right? Well, actually, it is now, because Elementor just introduced a new feature that allows you to disable the Google Fonts. So if you go to settings and then advanced, you can see that Google Fonts are enabled, you can disable it. This will make your website faster, but this means that you only then have these few fonts over here. So what you can also do now is download the Google Fonts that you want to use on your website, right? So let's say on Google Fonts, you want to work with Open Sans. It's a popular font. You can download it over here, then it will be downloaded on your computer, and then you can upload these files over here to keep your website fast. So now you know that custom fonts should actually be uploaded here, and the custom font over here we're actually gonna use for sizing. Then what about the system fonts? To be honest, I am not really sure how it works, but what I do know is that by default, if you set up the primary font to something really weird like this, then all of the fonts where you haven't connected anything to the global fonts will use that font. So let me show you. These ones are not connected at all. So I'm gonna change this one to something that looks a bit weird, like this. And there you can see it all changes. The secondary font, I don't know where they use it because I haven't found it, maybe in some WooCommerce websites or other themes. So what do you set up over here? I do not recommend to set up any settings over here. You could use a very weird font, for example, something like this, to always remind you that you need to connect it to the fonts that you actually want. But I think it's best to just leave it as default, and especially the weight, because the width that you set up over here will also influence how all of your other titles look. Because right now it's on 600 and all of these titles are connected to these ones. And let me show you, if you put it on default, this changes. So for your primary one, make sure that it doesn't have any settings at all. And your secondary one, I would do the same, but I've not found a place where they actually use this. Now the body font is something I would set up. Here I would set up the font that you want to use for your main body fonts, the line height that you want to use, and the weight. We're gonna dive into REM in a little bit, by the way. And for the accent text, you can put a value in here. This will be used in buttons. But you can also, if you want, add a custom font over here and always select that. So I actually only use the body fonts now on all my websites, and I don't use the primary, the secondary, and the accent. And if you're still having issues with how it looks on the front end, make sure to go to your settings and check this box, disable default fonts. This sometimes can solve some visibility issues. So as you can see, the basics are already not that easy, but we have tackled the most difficult part. Let's now explore the different options that we have and what kind of sizes you actually should use for your fonts. In Elementor, we have pixels, EM, REM, view width, and this pencil icon, which is a new feature, by the way. So what does this all mean? Pencil icon lets you input anything you want. So this could be a normal pixel value like this. You have to type px in order to see the results. And we're gonna use that later. Pixel is the default. Most people use this. They just slide it like this. And then you have EM and REM. So why am I not using pixels anymore? Because I used to use pixels. The reason is for accessibility. So let me make my browser a bit smaller, and let's just put in a pixel value over here. So we're gonna make this a big one, 64, and we're also gonna pick the same font as we have over here. So let's save it now. And this one is 64, and this one is also 64, but this one is set up via REM. So let me show you the difference. When you go to your browser settings and you go to appearance, then you can set up the font size on your browser. Some older people have their font sizes on large, and some people with really good eyes have it on small. Maybe because they want to see more on the screen. And as you can see, the one set up with pixels is still 64, but the one set up with REM actually changes according to what the user is setting up over here. So by using pixels, you're actually making it harder for people that don't have good eyes or for people that have really good eyes, right? So using REMs and EMs allows you to take advantage of this feature, and by using pixels, it's just simply not possible. But the numbers that you use for REM and EM are very different, because as you can see, 4 REM is the same as 64 pixels. And this is because 1 REM is 16 pixels. So 64 divided by 16 is 4 REM. Why is that? Well, because the default font by all browsers is 16 pixels. So 1 REM is 16 pixels. But if the user then changes his browser settings, it will grow. And that's not possible with pixels. So working with these numbers is a little bit easier and it's better. So then, what is the difference between REM and EM? REM is root EM, which is one value for the whole website. And that default value is 16 pixels. You can also change that if you want with code, but most Elementor users will not do that. With EM, it's kind of similar. It also looks at the default value, but you can set up a different size for each container. We don't really have the option in Elementor, I believe, to set that up. And EM is also a multiplier, so if there's a box within a box, this one has 2, this one has 4, then it becomes 8. So you have less control unless you really know what you're doing. So I recommend in Elementor always to use REM because it always connects back to 16 pixels for the whole website. Another benefit of using REM is that you can change the root value. So let's say that you've built the whole website and your client says, well, can not all the fonts be a little bit bigger? If you don't use REM, you have to go in every single font and make it bigger. With REM, you can just change the root font size for your whole website and make the default from 16 to 18, and therefore everything will scale 12.5%, which is awesome as well. Most people will not do that, but I wanted to explain. View width has to do with how wide the page is. I do not recommend to use that, and the pencil, we're gonna use that later because we're actually gonna combine REM and view width in order to create the scaling fonts. But now you know the differences. I hope it made sense. If you didn't understand it, just use REM. Trust me, it's better than using pixels. Now let's talk about how big your fonts should be. So now you know that 1 REM is based on 16 pixels, so 2 REM is based on 32. That's why with 64 pixels we had 4 REM. But what sizes are good to use on the web anyways? So first of all, there is a reason why the default is 16 pixels, because 16 pixels just works. For example, on the Living with Pixels website, you can see the default font is 16 pixels. By the way, this Chrome plugin, if you want to know, is called What Font. You can download that on Chrome, so you can click on any text and see how big it is. So I also do recommend for your main font to use 16. But then how big should your headings be? Let's take a look at Figma. So in Figma, you also have some default sizes. I think these are a good baseline, but the jumps are a bit inconsistent. So as you can see over here, this jumps down 16, then it jumps down 8, then 4, and then 6 again. I found this a bit inconsistent. So what I've done is I've created a sheet for myself. And this is the list that I am using right now. Like I said, the main body font is 16 pixels and the biggest heading is 64. That looks exactly like this. And then it goes down in consistent steps. So from 64 to 48 is a difference of 16. Here you can see the jumps. This is more consistent than what Figma offers. I don't know why Figma does it. Maybe I'm missing something, but this to me makes a little bit more sense. But then how big should it be on mobile? Because on mobile, 64 pixels or for REM is just too big, right? So I've done a lot of different tests and I've came up with the following values, which I think look good. Let me show you it again. My biggest title starts at 64, and then when you go to mobile, it starts to scale down, and then it ends at 48, which I think looks good on mobile, and then it slowly goes down towards the body text. And why have I chosen 48? Well, first of all, the jumps are also a bit consistent and the numbers are relatively easy to work with in terms of REM. And there's one important thing you need to know here, and that is that there's no difference between the body font on a desktop versus a mobile. It's a bit weird, but on a mobile phone, 16 pixels for body font also looks good. So if you go up from 16 to 48, of course, the jumps are smaller than they are on a desktop. So on mobile, they scale down in a less aggressive way. So now you might be asking, where is the tablet mode? Well, as I showed in the beginning, you don't have to use tablet mode if you use Clamp. Clamp is a CSS feature that allows you to have that scaling, because normally what you would have to do is put in a value REM over here for desktop, for example 4, and then go to your tablet mode and then put in 3, etc. But that's a lot more work, so if you just don't do that and you go to the pencil, you can just type in anything you want. So as you can see on my style page, you can go to this font clamping website, which I found thanks to Imran, by the way. So thank you, Imran. And you can put in the values here. I've already done that work for you. So all of these values over here, I've put them on the website, so you don't have to take a look at my messy sheet. You can just go to the website. By the way, the new website, if you've seen it, go to resources and then font sizes. And then over here, you have all of your titles. So what you can just do is just copy this this, then go to your fonts and just paste it in here. And then it automatically scales down from 64 to 48 with these values for all of your headings. If you only have 6 headings, you can of course only use that one. But if you like the values that I use, then you can just copy these ones and put them inside of your Elementor. If you don't like my font sizes, you can of course also go to the clamp generator and use different sizes over here. Maybe you guys have some suggestions for me. If you have and you think that my sizes are not that good, then let me know so I can change this page. But I think for most websites, these values are really nice to work with. So now we've covered the font sizes. Let's now go to the next step on how to set it up. Okay, I've already given away how to put in the clamps inside of the pencil over here. But what you should know is that when you use the font clamping website and you change the sizes over here, make sure to then use REM. So for example, minimum is 2 and it goes up to 3. And you copy this and you go to your Elementor and then you paste it. You should delete some things. This last little thing, you need to delete that. And also in the beginning, need to go to the beginning and then also delete font size because this is already a font size field, and then it works. If you find this a bit too difficult, then just go to REM and just put in one value for desktop, tablet and mobile. It's also fine, right? So that is all great for the headings. But as I said, the body text, they don't scale. If somebody has a good counter argument, let me know, but I haven't seen that on most websites. Body fonts do not scale, so then you don't have to use clamp. You can just put in the REM values, which I've also put on the website, by the way. So for example, your body should just be 1. So body, just 1 REM, no clamp, nothing. Really easy. Body bold is also 1 rem and then put on bold. My body L, large, is on 1.125 because 16 times 1.25 is 18 pixels, right? And body small, the same, but then inverted. And again, you can find these values over here as well. So that is how you set it up inside of your site settings. Make sure to click update. And then when you drag in a heading, so let's just do that. Let's delete this old one. Let's just drag in, oh, not a container. Let's just drag in a heading. You can go to style, you can click on your global fonts, you can select the title that you want, so for example title 2, and then you still have the freedom to pick an H3, an H5, an H1 for your SEO. Absolutely beautiful. It automatically already scales, so let's test that. We're gonna go to the page, refresh it, let's just see. Boom, it becomes smaller. As you can see, it's just a little difference because this is not the biggest title, but it works fine. And of course, we still have the freedom to change the typography afterwards to another font. Could be a local font on your website to keep your website fast. Let me lastly show you that, by the way. So on the Living with Pixels website, you can see that over here in the custom fonts, there's now this section called custom fonts. These are the fonts that I uploaded over here. So these are Google fonts, but I've disabled Google fonts on this website to keep it fast. And I've just uploaded the Google fonts over here, as you can see, and then I can still use them over here. So this is essentially how you use it. I think it's super simple to work with. And if you don't know anything about sizes, just use the values over here. It scales perfectly. No need to set up the tablet mode, and just use normal rems for body font and your subheading. I know that this wasn't easy, but once you set it up, it's perfect. Now, if you're serious about learning more about Elementor Pro, then consider taking a look at my course where I share everything I know about Elementor. I will explain all the options so that you know what's possible and my whole workflow that allows me to build websites pretty fast and also keep them fast. So I hope that you found some value in this video. If you did, let me know. If you still think I'm doing things wrong, then please let me know, because it was so hard to wrap my head around it for me myself, but I think this workflow is really good. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.